Howdy, and welcome to LeeReads, where I talk about the books I've been reading and enjoying lately. I have a big book hangover, and I have to tell you all about this book. Dark of the West by Joanna Hathaway. This is a young adult fantasy that really has historical fiction vibes to it, because it's set in a secondary imaginary world, but there is no magic. It feels like World War II era times where there are airplanes with machine or railguns on them, and there's also still monarchies. There's a royal league of monarchies that have kind of a political alliance. It's like if you want to read World War II historical fiction without it being the World War II war story, but that kind of feeling to it, themes of warfare or war brewing on the horizon, and there's some political maneuverings, I think that you'll like this book. Before I start gushing about the characters and the plot, I've alluded a little bit to the setup and the world building, but I'll explain a little bit more. So, this story follows two main characters, and they're from two different nations. One character, Ethan, is from a nation that only gained its independence through a military overthrow about 10 years ago. And his father, the general, was the general that led his people in this revolution to victory. Ethan has grown up in the shadow of the glory of his father and his older brothers, and has always been expected to follow in their footsteps in the military. His father is the general, his eldest brother is the commander of their armed forces, his other brother is very high ranking within the Navy, and Ethan himself is in flight school and is expected to rise to top flight. But that's not really what Ethan's ever wanted. He kind of has been purposefully hanging lower in the rankings because he doesn't really want to go to war. He doesn't glorify fighting. He'd be perfectly happy being a transport pilot for some logistics because he knows he can't totally escape the war, but maybe he doesn't have to fight on the front lines. Of course, his father has other ideas for him and knows which strings to pull to get him to fall in line. Our other main character, Aurelia, represents the royal faction to the political situation going on. When she was young, her father, the king, was murdered, and so her mother became the ruling monarch in his stead. But her mother is from one of the southern kingdoms, and unfortunately, her people distrust the country that her mother comes from. Although her mother currently rules and will rule until her brother comes of age and takes his crown in a year, there is unrest within her own court, and Aurelia finds herself kind of playing peacemaker a lot. She just wants safety for her mother, stability for her family's rule, and does firmly believe in the right to rule. So you can see how there are already different factions coming into play. We have this kind of military dictatorship, a new nation that perceives that they had been oppressed and have risen above that, and they have to have political dealings still with monarchies who believe in the divine right to rule. And of course, those two lines of thought come into conflict. To make things a little bit more complicated, the general and the queen have a history. Whenever they were younger, they were allies in a rebellion in the South. This whole rebellion in the South is just a background kind of pain for both of them. They were allies in the past, and something happened that now has made them enemies. So even though they personally hate each other, politically, their two nations may need to work together. Amidst all of the other political maneuverings that are going on with other nations in this story, the general and the queen decide that they should enter into an alliance, and the general and some of his family come to the queen's palace basically to try to work out this alliance. There's a lot of distrust, of course, from the side that's ruled by the monarchy. They look at the upstart non-royals as, who do they think they are? All they want is bloodshed. All they want to do is fight and conquer. And you have the military nation looking at the royals like, who do they think they are? They just assume that they know what's best for everybody. So there's a lot of interesting conflict in the large scale. Ethan, the general's youngest son, is a lieutenant in the Air Corps, and he's a very good pilot, and he is brought along to this negotiation. But he's given orders from his father, don't tell anyone who you are, but try to get to know the prince, try to get to know the princess, try to learn what you can that might help our cause. And Aurelia is learning more and more about some of the secrets of her family and their dealings with the rebellion in the south, and feels as though the throne they hold is just in a delicate balance where they could lose everything, lose their lives. And she really is trying to fight for peace. She doesn't want war. So even though she doesn't trust these people they're trying to enter an alliance with, she wants everyone to just sit down and talk and try to work something out, because surely reason can rule. But can it? Can it really? Then Ethan and Aurelia meet, and I suppose you can see where this is going and why it's so wonderful. Because the goals of Ethan's family and the goals of Aurelia's family, they can't coexist. They're forced to keep secrets from them and kind of political maneuver around them and do some spying on the other one. There's just so much layering that goes on with the plot, where you think you know where the story is going to go, but maybe you don't actually. One thing that I really admire about this story is that it's so richly woven together, all these different conflicts that are going on and all these different motivations. Also, we see events unfolding when Ethan and Aurelia are together, and there are two different perspectives that they have as they're watching all the characters on school. But also you see events unfolding when it's just one or the other of them, and you see ambassadors and other characters show up on either side, and you start to wonder, oh, is that guy gonna double cross them? And the thing that makes the story feel the most satisfying is that you have gone into it after reading the prologue, and this prologue is so effective. It takes place several years later than the current events of the story, and you see Ethan and Aurelia. They're in this war-torn city, each sitting down on opposite sides of a negotiation table. There's clearly been a war. There's more that's probably coming. They're clearly on different sides of the war and kind of duty-bound, and whatever they're fighting for is in direct conflict with the fact that they still very clearly have strong feelings for one another. And so you just know that something has gone sideways. They wound up on opposite sides of the war despite all of the hope that they had, and then you start the story proper, and it's with this kind of foreshadowing and knowledge of things aren't going to go how you want them to go, but I want them to go that way for you. And I can't wait to see how we get from where the events of the first book end. I want to see what happens to lead us up to where the prologue was, and then potentially get beyond it. So I just think the structure of this story was really well done, because it's almost like a slow motion train wreck. Like, going in that the story is going to break your heart, and yet you enjoy every minute of it. I found myself riveted. And the prose, I really enjoyed the prose. It's very well written. The scenes are very evocative. It's not just a loose sketch. Like, you feel like you are there. You are in this palace in the mountains that's peaceful. You are on this desert military base in the middle of nowhere that suddenly is actually becoming the front lines. You are in this war-torn city in the prologue of the book. So yes, I just have a huge book hangover. The second book is already out, and I just am dying to pick it up. And then the last book in the trilogy actually comes out later this month. I just had to gush over it. It's not a type of book that I normally read because it's fantasy, but there's no magic in it. It's really like a political, historical fiction, romance kind of, and a secondary world that's not about war. It's not about fighting on the front lines, but yet war is looming, and one of the characters is a fighter pilot. Yeah, it's just, there's a lot going on. I highly recommend this story. I'm really looking forward to the next two in the trilogy. I can't wait to see how the author puts it all together, because she's already given us in the prologue so much information. How are we going to get from where we are now to there, and what's going to happen? I can't wait to find out. So that is Dark of the West, and I really hope that you check it out. And don't forget to support your local library. Bye.